Loss has a way of feeling like punishment at first. The absence burns deeper than the betrayal ever did. It's confusing when people vanish who once felt permanent. At first, it feels like failure, like you did something wrong to deserve their exit. You replay conversations, trace moments, wonder where the story broke. What most never realize is that removal is part of protection. Sometimes the soul senses what the mind refuses to see. God doesn't always tear people away to hurt. It's to clear the fog. The heart aches before it understands that endings often arrive as disguised beginnings. Distance is divine precision at work, pruning what can't grow in your next season. You don't lose good things, you lose distractions dressed as comfort. The silence that follows isn't punishment, it's preparation. What feels like loss today becomes the very clarity you prayed for years later. There's a kind of mercy hidden inside separation. It feels brutal because the lesson touches your core. The hardest truth is that not every connection is meant to last. Some arrive to trigger growth, not permanence. Those who leave abruptly teach discernment, the difference between energy that nourishes and energy that drains. When someone walks out, the vacancy exposes where dependency replaced authenticity. The emptiness becomes mirror and medicine. It forces reconstruction from within. People rarely change when comfortable. Pain becomes the architect of awareness. Every ending pushes you toward self-trust, toward boundaries, toward balance. The heart learns to stop chasing closure and start creating peace. The realization that God removed someone for your evolution doesn't soothe immediately. It heals slowly. Understanding arrives one quiet morning when you no longer crave their return, only gratitude for the escape. Life teaches balance through subtraction. We spend years adding friends, habits, attachments, until the weight breaks us. Then, everything unnecessary begins to fall away. What feels like collapse is actually calibration. The universe rearranges what your mind refuses to release. People with misaligned intentions cannot walk beside divine purpose for long. Their removal feels personal, but it's mechanical, like gears separating to prevent friction from destroying the whole engine. The space left behind is not void, it's oxygen. Absence teaches appreciation. Solitude refines vision. Those moments alone, where silence hums louder than words, rebuild identity from truth instead of approval. What was taken away wasn't stolen, it was sorted. Life only looks cruel to those who confuse pruning with punishment. The design was never to break you. It was to strip away what blocked your becoming. In love, this truth cuts to the deepest. When someone you cared for disappears, the soul doesn't process it logically. It demands reason. The mind searches endlessly, asking why someone who felt so aligned could turn so distant. But divine timing doesn't seek permission. It enforces alignment. Sometimes the heart falls for the test, not the destination. Some lovers are lessons dressed as soulmates. Their exit creates the emptiness needed for self-identity to rebuild. When love leaves, it takes illusions with it. You're forced to see what you were giving, what you were accepting, and who you were pretending to be. The understanding arrives long after the tears dry, when peace feels more valuable than presence. That's when you recognize the removal as rescue. It wasn't rejection from God, it was redirection away from pain disguised as passion. In friendships, the same law applies but feels subtler. One day, a bond fades. No fight, no explanation, just distance. The heart interprets silence as betrayal. In truth, silence is clarity's voice. People fade when purposes diverge. What once connected you, shared pain, shared identity, no longer exists. God moves people when their chapter in your story has served its role. Some were bridges, some mirrors, some anchors you mistook for wings. It's not cruelty, it's rotation. When the energy exchange ends, holding on becomes decay. The lesson is learning to release without resentment. Friendships end quietly because their lesson isn't loss, it's alignment. Life removes who no longer fits your frequency so that peace can find room to breathe. The exit isn't failure, it's fulfillment. They served their role in your evolution, even if it ended in silence. Work environments reveal divine removal differently. When you lose opportunities, positions, or people tied to ambition, the ego screams. The plan collapses, the timeline dissolves. But sometimes closed doors are the mercy you'd never have chosen. God reroutes what pride would have destroyed. Those who betrayed your trust at work weren't enemies, they were catalysts. Their deception forced self-sufficiency. Their dismissal taught resilience. What felt like exile became the birthplace of independence. You don't grow where flattery cushions failure. The higher path demands isolation before elevation. When certain people leave, you stop confusing dependence for loyalty. That's when skill becomes strength and rejection becomes redirection. Divine removal clears the stage for precision. Every setback was simply subtraction, preparing the space for expansion. Family loss, however, feels sacred. When people bound by blood drift or die, the pain carves deeper because the connection predates understanding. Grief distorts time, stretching seconds into eternity. The mind begs for meaning, but sometimes the only truth is timing. Those taken too soon often completed what they came to teach. Death feels final only to the living. Spirit continues its journey beyond what perception can grasp. God doesn't take out of cruelty. He transitions purpose from visible to invisible. Every soul you lose leaves a fragment of wisdom behind. Their absence becomes an inner voice, a compass that whispers when you need it most. The love that once felt external becomes guidance from within. Death doesn't end relationships. It transforms them. The understanding comes not when pain ends, but when you start living with gratitude instead of grief. Divine removal also happens through delay. When certain dreams stall, it feels like punishment. The world tells you to hustle harder, but doors stay locked. Frustration builds until you realize delay isn't denial, it's protection. Sometimes you aren't losing people, you're losing timing. God withholds to protect you from what your readiness can't yet carry. That's why patience feels like suffering, because the ego measures time, while divinity measures alignment. When the right moment finally arrives, everything clicks effortlessly. The people meant for that season appear without effort, while the ones from before can't access your new rhythm. The delay was never a mistake, it was calibration. Every unanswered prayer was preparation. The moment you stop chasing what fell away, the things designed for your frequency start finding you naturally. The understanding of loss always comes late. You see patterns backward, how each removal sharpened awareness, each goodbye protected peace. The connections you begged to keep would have anchored you to versions of yourself that no longer exist. Every departure built discipline, every silence built strength. What once felt like rejection now reads as redirection. The people who walked away freed the energy needed for evolution. The ones who betrayed gave you clarity money can't buy. The story that once broke you now builds others. Pain translated into purpose becomes the purest revenge. You start to thank God not for who came, but for who left. Because what left made room for what's meant. At first, subtraction feels like collapse. The silence after people leave or situations crumble feels endless. Everything once familiar fades, and the absence feels like a warning from the universe. The human mind resists emptiness. It wants to fill the void with noise, distraction, anyone or anything that can mimic the comfort once lost. But divine subtraction doesn't come to destroy, it comes to refine. The removal clears space where illusions once lived. In time, what looked like punishment becomes positioning. Loss prepares capacity. When certain connections fall away, what's left behind is room for the authentic. The subtraction burns because it's surgical. It cuts only what no longer belongs. Once the pain dulls, the gain appears quiet but certain. Divine order never subtracts without purpose. It replaces chaos with clarity, imitation with alignment, noise with meaning. Some people are removed like weights cut from wings. While they were near, the soul stayed grounded, heavy from compromise and exhaustion. The separation feels cruel at first, but that's how flight begins. Through release, not rescue. The heart rarely volunteers for transformation, it must be forced into it. Divine subtraction is never random. It removes what drains the very energy needed for expansion. In toxic relationships, that means people who feed on guilt or control. When they're gone, it feels like emptiness, but it's freedom disguised as loneliness. Slowly, strength grows where dependency once lived. The same hands that once clung to validation now build peace in silence. The air feels cleaner. The nights feel longer but calmer. This is how God adds, by first removing what contaminates capacity. There's a moment when understanding begins to form, not through revelation but through reflection. Looking back, the timeline begins to make sense. Every person lost, every opportunity missed, every ending. All of it starts connecting. The subtraction was a map to alignment. Divine intelligence never removes without replacing, but replacements arrive in unexpected forms. The relationship that ended makes space for purpose. The betrayal that hurt most awakens discernment. The rejection from one place pushes you toward your rightful platform. Life rarely gifts clarity during loss. It waits until silence becomes perspective. Divine arithmetic doesn't follow human order. It multiplies through subtraction. Everything taken was clearing space for everything true. The pattern only reveals itself once the noise fades. In toxic environments, subtraction can look like isolation. You start losing people, invitations, relevance. The gossip fades. The phone grows quiet. It feels like exile. But isolation often precedes elevation. The divine doesn't allow new creation in contaminated space. The moment you outgrow dysfunction, you're removed from it, not by choice, but by vibration. The old frequency no longer recognizes your energy. You start standing alone, not because you're unloved, but because your spirit no longer fits small places. The subtraction isn't social punishment, it's spiritual migration. Soon, the same solitude that felt unbearable becomes sanctuary. Silence reveals who was real and who was there for control. In that emptiness, wisdom is planted, and once it grows, it never leaves. Sometimes the subtraction comes through conflict. People you trusted turn cold. The loyalty you gave becomes weaponized. What once felt like home starts to suffocate. The betrayal feels personal, but in hindsight, it was divine exposure. Certain masks can't stay on forever. The moment the truth surfaces, God acts like gravity, pulling away what no longer holds value. The hurt cuts deep, but clarity follows. You stop mourning who left and start noticing what left with them. Chaos, confusion, anxiety. The atmosphere lightens as if the soul finally exhaled. This is divine subtraction in motion. Removal of illusion for restoration of truth. The loss wasn't destruction, it was detox. The subtraction was simply God pulling the poison out of your peace. There's also the quiet subtraction, the kind where no fight happens. Just distance. People fade, opportunities pass, doors close softly. It feels like failure because no reason was given. But that's how divine timing works. It doesn't explain, it aligns. Silence becomes the sorting ground for destiny. Those who can't handle your next level get rerouted. The job that rejected you wasn't loss, it was redirection toward your purpose. The person who ghosted didn't harm you, they saved you time. The friendship that ended wasn't betrayal, it was expiration. The subtraction was protection dressed as rejection. Over time, what you once begged for becomes what you thank God for taking away. The missing pieces were never missing. They were replaced with something only seen through hindsight. When divine subtraction strikes, the ego fights back. It screams, wanting to repair, rebuild, reattach. The mind craves understanding, but understanding doesn't come from control. It comes from surrender. The soul knows what the mind denies. Sometimes love must be lost for self-worth to be found. Sometimes jobs must vanish for gifts to surface. Divine mathematics doesn't obey human comfort. It rearranges everything to match the vibration of purpose. At first, it feels like everything's being stripped away. Later, you realize only what was false burned off. The addition isn't immediate, it grows through silence. One day, peace replaces confusion, growth replaces fear, and what you thought you lost reveals itself as liberation.